What's up, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm also going to talk about some big data that just came out, some new earnings, what you should be watching for as time goes on. But just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $1,000, you're guaranteed 15 in total. Not to mention 8.1% APY on uninvested cash. The offer ends very soon, just a couple of weeks. Anyways, now let's talk about what's happening with the broader markets. So SPY's pushed very, very nicely after the election, and it was very, very vertical for the last couple of days. But after that happens, you do tend to need a little bit of a pullback in a very, very healthy manner. And there's a very, very good chance that could be happening for today. I say that because our indicators are showing that we're starting to turn over a bit, and we're seeing some new developments I want to talk about in just a couple of minutes. So just know this. Today is Friday, November 8th, 2024, at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time. 30 minutes after the market ends up opening, we have the Michigan Consumer Sentiment Report, the 5-year inflationary expectations, and more data coming out from Michigan. Also, don't forget that we have Bowman giving a speech at 11 a.m. But for the most part, most of the data is quite minor. We'll see. Excuse me. We'll see what happens at 10 a.m. As far as the market is moving, we pumped quite a bit after the election, but then we had Jerome Powell give a speech at FOMC. The Fed gave us a 25 basis point cut. The market seemed to have priced that in quite quickly, and the market didn't really move much when he was speaking. It did pump a little bit. But now the question remains, after pricing that in, will the market turn from here? And that is still a possibility. Jerome Powell didn't really say anything that was too significant that really could have caused the market to pump like crazy. It was just the same old things that he tends to say. On top of this, there was some talk about how earnings have been nice beats so far. And then speaking of earnings, we did have one important one that came out today. We had Sony announcing their earnings, and they did relatively well. So what happened was their revenue was very close to expectations at 2.97 trillion yen. That is once again very close to expectations. But operating profits are what ended up saving this because we got 455 billion, which is above what we were expecting at 336 billion. That's in yen, by the way. So that's actually great news for them. They did better than expected. So for the fiscal 2025, we're looking at 12.7 trillion yen as our target. That is now an increase in their guidance compared to 12.6 trillion in yen before. That is some good news. They also expect an operating profit of about 1.3 trillion yen. That is in line with previous forecasts. So that's bullish news. That's why the share price is up. They raised their guidance. Now, when it comes to other pieces of news, just know this. We have about 726,000 of these puts expiring, and over 200 and or 324 plus thousand. Just know that 580 is max pain and there's a high put to call ratio. So we'll see what that leads to at the end of the day. But before we get that move, there is a possibility the market does turn a little bit because of this right here. When you zoom out all the way, you will see that we have a nice looking trend line that's developing right here. This yellow trend line is our resistance, and we're very close to where it is, which could lead to a bit of a rejection. So I believe that between 596 to 597.5 is going to be a tough resistance for SPY. And we could even just turn from right here because you could see we pushed up to about 596, and since then we've been kind of chopping around. So this could be a signal that the market is going to get a very healthy pullback. It is due for that, as our signals are suggesting that. If we hold above 596, there's 596. We're looking for 596.5 as our target. And if we do break past both of those, we're looking for 597.6. And if we end up losing support at 595, we'll get 594, 592.5, and then the much lower levels like the low 590s as our supports. I think what's going to happen is this: we kind of chop around a bit, then we start pulling back for 594, eventually 592.5, and these levels down here are most likely going to be tested. I think there might be a little bit of a pullback coming before we try to bounce again, but for now, look for a small dip as the most likely move. We might be losing 594 for confirmation, but I think that's most likely the case. I also say this because ES is turning right over here. And why is that? Because we hit 6,000, which is a very, very tough level psychologically. If we break past that, look for 6,050. Otherwise, there is a risk of us declining back down towards 59.80, then eventually 59.50 could be potential targets. So be careful, guys. There might be a slight dip on ES just temporarily as the most likely possibility, unless we hold above 6,000 for at least 4 hours. For Nvda, we reached my target of 150, but now we're kind of starting to dip here. We need to hold above 150. Otherwise, there's a risk of us coming back down to about 146.5. Just keep that in mind. For Bitcoin, we're just trading sideways here. We have tough resistance at 77,000. There is a risk of this dipping closer to about 75,000. So keep that in mind as well. For NQ is kind of rejecting here. We have 21,250 is our resistance. If we don't hold above that, I think there's a risk of us dipping closer to about 21,080. Eventually, all the way down here towards 20,950 as well could be a target. So the lower 21,000 area, could be coming very soon. For the QQQ, we hit or came very close to about 515, which is what my target was during the pre-market. Now it looks like it's trying to turn here, so there's a risk of it coming back down to 511, 510, then 507 is our potential targets. Just keep that in mind. Apple, Apple's also kind of flat here. We do have a tough resistance at 228. We'll see if it breaks or not. If it does, we could get closer to like 229. But just know this is previous support becoming resistance. If we don't hold above 228, we could be dipping back down to 226.5. Keep that in mind. For the IWM Russell 2000, we are starting to dip right here. We could be looking for 235 and eventually much lower levels like 233. So there is a risk of some downside, in my opinion. For coin, coin is pushing nicely. We have a resistance to watch for at 260. If we break that, look for 262 and 265. It's possible it pushes a little bit more, but then there could be a tough resistance at 260 that causes us to slow down. So for a little bit more upside on coin, we'll see how it ends up reacting. As far as Amazon goes, just know this. Amazon's starting to turn a little bit. We could be on our way back down to about 208. Eventually, our next target is to be down closer to like 205. There is a risk of some downside, in my personal opinion. For Meta, we pumped very, very nicely yesterday. Now we're starting to pull back a bit. We could be on our way back down towards 590, which if it fails, we have 588 and 585 as our potential targets. So watch and see how things end up moving with that. Microsoft could also be dipping back down to 421, then 420. And we'll see if we get a bounce off those levels or not. And then Google has kind of like a double top right here. We hit basically just under 183. If we had broken that, we would remain bullish, but there is a risk this is kind of like declining back down towards 180 flat. So I see a risk of that. So just keep that in mind. With that being said, guys, that's what I'm seeing for these different stocks. There are risks of stocks kind of turning. So I think that could lead to a little bit of a shift in the markets. Even like Tesla, I think I may have skipped over Tesla. Tesla has 300 as a tough resistance. It is tough historically. I think it might try to fight for 300, maybe try to break a little bit above it towards 302 to 305. But then it still might turn and try to retest 295 and eventually 290. Just be very careful, guys, especially if the market starts dipping very soon. So I think the odds are favoring that. So with that being said, I want to thank you all so much for listening. Be prepared for some volatility at 10 a.m. as we have the Michigan Consumer Sentiment data coming out. And then don't forget, the end of the day is going to have more manipulation due to the options chain. Besides that, I hope you all take care, and I'll see you guys very soon in my next video in just a couple of hours. Until then, I hope you guys have a very, very awesome rest of your day. And make sure you watch those levels very carefully no matter what happens. Once again, guys, the risk is to the downside looking at the market for now. All right, thank you for listening, and peace out.